The Legend of Zelda has undergone significant changes over the past few years, with Breath of the Wild marking the advent of this transformation. Discarding the traditional format that coded the series for decades, Breath of the Wild adopted a free, open-world design philosophy that was monumentally successful. So successful, that it now received 3 follow-up entries set in that same era. Alongside the direct sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, there was Age of Calamity, a sort of prequel that diverged into its own narrative, and that leads now into Age of Imprisonment. This newest game is a more authentic prequel to Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, focusing on events of the imprisoning war through the lens of a time-traveling Princess Zelda. Like Calamity, this title is a musou game developed by Koei Tecmo, emphasizing enemy slaying on a massive scale. You know, typical 1 vs 1000 shenanigans. Now, to be candid, Age of Imprisonment has felt like the least talked about entry in the Breath of the Wild saga, and after playing it, you aren't missing much outside of the compelling core combat. And we'll get into all that in this review. Throughout Hyrule Age of Imprisonment, you follow Zelda after her distant time travel as seen in Tears of the Kingdom, covering not only the imprisoning war initiated by Ganondorf, but also direct interactions with her ancestry, King Roru and Queen Sonia. It's a premise with clear potential for endearing dynamics, and a handful of new characters from this era join the cast. However, the game has a habit of glossing over major events and relationships, mostly found in dry cutscene direction that undersells key moments.
A construct? But I've never seen one like this before.
Please, Minoru. We mustn't disturb it.
Even given the genre's usual focus, there's never a strongly illustrated depiction of Hyrule's founding kingdom or the royal family. Most characters appear because the plot demands it, while others receive so little screen time that nothing sticks. Some story beats land, but the occasional intrigue fades quickly, and for a period meant to hold so much importance, this era doesn't feel fully explored. On the other hand, the peculiar new character, a construct with a will of his own, accompanied by a chatty Korok, makes up the most enjoyable portion of the new cast. Their roles, in contrast with Zelda, feel unique and more engaging. The Construct's inclusion may remind some players of how Age of Calamity shifted from being an authentic Breath of the Wild prequel, which I personally didn't mind. Still, this game never reaches that level of deviation, so don't worry if you disliked Calamity's narrative approach. I should also note that Breath of the Wild era is my least favorite story in the Zelda franchise, so reception will heavily depend on the player. Gameplay is the central draw here, and Age of Imprisonment is moderately fulfilling in that regard. Progression is split across missions on a world map with a loop that goes about how you'd expect. Your general goal involves cutting down waves of enemies and taking out highlighted targets. Each playable character, all of whom you can swap between mid-stage, has their own set of light and heavy attacks that form distinct combos. Stronger foes have guard gauges that must be broken, and perfect dodges trigger flurry attacks for free damage. Characters can also team up and coordinate strikes that rapidly reduce break gauges. It's all pretty straightforward, but a few wrinkles help prevent combat from growing dull. Zonai devices can be found and equipped by any character, covering various combat roles like elemental streams or projectile counters. Characters also have directional special skills. These moves, along with Zonai devices, use meters that recharge over time or through collected batteries. The balance here feels fair, and major attacks land with satisfying impact. Further elements can also be combined, such as wind mixing with fire to create flaming tornadoes, adding a welcome variety to the combat and boosting some of the damage output. Still, some gimmicks like areas of mud shielding enemies can drag a bit, but they do force you to adjust your approach instead of mindlessly spamming attacks. On the roster, the Construct is easily the standout. Unlike the others, it integrates with Zonai tools into the heavy parts of its combos and feels more freeform and adaptable than any character in the lineup. It even morphs into aerial battles that, despite some repetition, help break up the action. Sadly, most of the remaining cast feels underdeveloped. A noticeable chunk of the adventure consists of new faces from this conflict who play like filler foot soldiers or leaders with little build-up. There is at least a healthy layer of preparation before missions where you can upgrade weapons with gathered materials and temporarily empower characters at camps. These camps, which are also available mid-mission, accept your materials in exchange for boosts to special gauge restoration, experience gain, and movement speed. In all honesty, you gain so many materials that you rarely have to think about resource management, which feels like a missed opportunity. Still, that abundance keeps progression moving at a fast pace. You'll make quick strides, especially through material delivery quests, which offer character-specific bonuses like increased health or new combo strings. If this game excels anywhere beyond its core combat, it's in its steady sense of meaningful reward, even if collecting the necessary items requires very little thought from the player. The volume and variety of content is where things start to slip. Musou games benefit from replayability, but not necessarily to the extreme of Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, but enough to keep players engaged. Age of Imprisonment partially succeeds at this with several optional missions, though many are so short that they feel like tasks instead of fully considered objectives. Raising the difficulty can add weight to your progress, but it doesn't fix the limited scope of what you're actually doing. This also doesn't help the collectible Korok seeds, which return here for some reason, as the maps are pretty compact and the seeds are easy to spot, making the feature feel pointless. Another system worth mentioning is territory control. Completing certain missions shifts territory from Ganondorf to you, opening extra tasks and adding another step to the progression loop. Sometimes you'll need to defend these areas before a set number of missions pass, helping convey the stakes of the ongoing war in gameplay terms. Age of Imprisonment runs impressively well on the Switch too. The frame rate is stable, load times are quick, and the presentation matches the broader Breath of the Wild style. Still, technical performance is a must for Musou, and it's reassuring to see it handled so cleanly here, especially so early in the Switch 2's lifespan. Now, you probably already had a firm idea of whether you planned to play Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. Those invested in the Breath of the Wild era will likely find its depiction of this age worth seeing through. As a musou, it delivers a gratifying cycle backed by creative combat options and easy to understand milestones. However, its dull storytelling, uneven cast, and hollow quest system come across as obligatory checkboxes that can drag down the experience. Regardless of one's feelings towards this entry, it's clear that this chapter of Zelda's history needs to be put to rest. It feels like ages since there has been a Zelda game that matches the series' previous design philosophy, with even echoes of wisdom leaning on a solve-all gameplay gimmick from the start. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting a return to my preferred style given the massive success of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I do hope the franchise eventually leans into a new era that resonates with gamers like me. Noisy Pixel is giving Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by your supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.